Before we start, it's Ibbotson or Ibbotson?
Yeah, you said it right the other night.
Ibbotson?
I was like, yeah! I could hear you hesitate. But you totally said it right. Yeah.
Okay, because I listened to other podcasts you were in.
They say everyone says it wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I got it.
Yeah.
So we have Alex Ibbotson from Canada Backcountry Services.
Yep.
Today, you were in Fernie.
Yeah.
Actually doing an Avalanche workshop. How did that go? What was it about? What were you guys doing?
Are we on? Or
yeah, we're on. Just curious how it went.
Yeah. It was great. So they're called Snow and Avalanche workshops.
Yeah.
And they're all over the place. They're continued professional development for Avalanche professionals and practitioners.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Good turnout?
Good turnout. It was really casual, grassroots. A lot of locals there, a lot of locals presenting, which is neat because you get that kind of more of a authentic experience.
Yeah. Can you turn the TV off for me? Remote's right there.
Yeah, and actually the host, Duncan from Avalanche Canada, was hilarious. He was emceeing it.
Yeah.
Tons of great prizes. Lots of great sponsors.
Yeah?
Like Ghost Rider Mountain Sports.
So that was another thing I was going to bring up. You picked up a new sled today.
I did.
From a new sponsor.
I did, yeah. Really grateful that Ghost Rider Mountain Sports is, Motorsports, sorry, is, gotta get that right, if they're the sponsor. They're sponsoring this Indigenous apprenticeship project that I'm doing with Canada Backcountry Services.
Yeah, I got that written down. I was going to ask you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
There's a few goals associated with it. Number one is to increase Indigenous representation in adventure tourism. And I'm Indigenous, I'm Métis, and we're actually overpopulated within snowmobile communities, particularly if you go up north. It's kind of a shocker to some people, but I pay attention, I do research and whatnot, and if you think about it, the fur trade transitioned into trapping and snowmobiling was an essential backcountry mobility for trappers initially. So when you have a lot of traditional snowmobile culture, people who've been doing it for generations and generations, often there is Indigenous lineage, Indigenous history associated with that. Yeah. So
now they were on dogs originally, and then now with sleighs, and then eventually moved on to snowmobiles and did all the trapping on sleds. And actually, that's their main mode of transportation in some of the northern towns, villages, I guess would be the better way to put it. And they're riding the sleds all winter long. Nations. Yeah. That's their main mode of transportation up north, is snowmobiles now. So everyone has a snowmobile.
Yeah.
I've heard a few stories of guys traveling northern BC, up in the Northwest Territories this summer. And it's like, there are sleds in these Indigenous villages everywhere. Like they just have, everyone has sleds. And when the snow melted, that's where that sled got parked for the year. And as soon as it snows, they're going to walk over, fire that thing back up, and then that's their transportation now again for the entire winter.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of snowmobiles with them, that's for sure.
And oddly, when you start thinking about adventure tourism, natural resources, environmental, in like an economic development capacity, we're underrepresented. So part of reconciliation is getting Indigenous people in spaces that we have been excluded from. And that's what this project's all about.
Awesome.
And another piece of it is a lot of the land use and land rights within BC are going into the hands of First Nations, where they're managing their own natural resources.
Yeah.
And in order to do that year round, you have to have some specialized winter mobility skills, avalanche training to do it safely. And then also when people start developing these skills for work, they translate into recreation. And we all know when we get into the mountains, that's when we can feel really one with the land. And it's life-changing to be able to be in the mountains more often.
And that's where you come in. And you're going to be training these people that want to go into the mountains.
Yeah, ideally, I would love to do it as a package with avalanche training, snowmobile mountain riding skills, and trailer familiarization. That's what I've been doing with Nutz Natural Resources here. Yeah. And some of what some of the great things that happened with our partnership is they said, hey, we have an activity where people are getting injured. Can you put together custom curriculum so that we can reduce those incidents? And yeah.
So are you teaching people how to load and unload sleds too, to get out into the mountains? So you said trailer.
With the trailer familiarization course, that is often done in the summertime.
Okay.
Because often a lot of the staff come on sort of in the spring. So then it's often with a quad.
Okay.
Loading and unloading is part of the snowmobile mountain riding skills curriculum. And it really depends on what kind of equipment they have. And quite often it's young people who don't have a lot of experience on this equipment. They're in the environmental sector, natural resources. They didn't grow up sledding. And, you know, when someone hasn't ever loaded a snowmobile, so it's great when they have trailers rather than sled decks, because a lot of people are quite intimidated by loading and unloading sled decks, and we know there's quite a few incidents in that.
Has Captain Chaos signed up for that course yet? Because we just talked about that.
Yep.
Flopped that sled on the side off the Dwayne Hoyt's truck in Revelstoke, and we were just talking about how the trucks are lifted, how high they are, and that is a challenge. As soon as one little thing goes wrong, it can be really nasty. So that's cool. I didn't know that you guys were training that to start the whole program, or that's one of the things that you can teach people.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, not very many. I've never actually had a client who has a sled deck. It's always trailers.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they've done their research about incidents and they go with the trailer. But then trailers have their own kind of bag of problems when you're trailering around day after day with bearings and whatnot. But that's all a part of my course, and I use the Transport Canada standards, which I got lasered into me as a Canadian Ranger. Every time we'd bring our equipment for Canadian Ranger field training exercises, if someone didn't have a reflector where you need a reflector, they wouldn't get compensated for their equipment.
That's crazy. So today you grabbed your sled up in Fernie.
Yeah.
And you have it on your truck right now.
I do. It looks beautiful.
When are you going riding?
I don't know. When you going riding?
Thinking about going this week.
Ooh.
Same thing. Pick mine up. So we were up there on yesterday, and they built 3 of them. So yours, mine, and other customers. And I have a time lapse. We did some video with the guy building the sleds. They're a tech. It was kind of cool to see, once the box comes off, what do they got to do? So a few little features that, I was going to put together in a video and show everybody.
Great. I'll look at that if I ever have to replace a bumper or two.
Right. But yeah, so it was the ski, the handlebars, gas, oil, some computer stuff. But yeah, they go over it. He touches on it. I do a little interview with him.
Nice.
So this Indigenous program opened a few doors for you, and I was curious to know more about this TV show you were telling me about. Are they connected in any kind of way, or is it something totally different?
That's totally different. The TV show's called Still Standing, and it actually airs on Tuesday.
Starting the first episode?
Well, I'm just in one episode.
Oh, okay. So this episode that you're in just happens to be this coming Tuesday.
This coming Tuesday.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what is it about?
It's about Still Standing. It's a CBC TV show, and it's been on for 10 seasons. And they go to small Canadian towns, and they kind of tell the economic development story, the history of the small town. So still standing after economic crisis or changes within industries.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the way they do it is they come to town and they just sort of start asking for characters. And then people name drop, and then they interview the people, and then those people name drop. And if your name gets dropped enough times and they like what you say in an interview, you get chosen as a character. So I got selected, and also snowmobiling is pretty cool. So yeah. I had a good product to show them, and I took Johnny snowmobiling, and he was on the Catalyst 600.
Yeah.
Last year, and after 5 minutes of verbal instruction on how to get on edge. And that was the whole point, is in the mountains, we have to ride on edge versus flat track, which is more of kind of like an Eastern way riding on trail. So I was kind of explaining the difference and how to do it. So after 5 minutes of instruction, he was getting on edge, ripping around. And it was like hard pack.
Never ridden a sled before, or you like trail ride?
Never ridden a sled before.
Wow.
He had quite a bit of motorcycle experience, which is a transferable skill for sure.
For balance.
But still.
Pretty impressive.
The counter steering, I think, when I teach people and they have motorcycle experience, they can kind of know what we're talking about with that a bit better.
Yep. Well, yeah, you're not steering much on a motorcycle. You're leaning.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Good job. In 5 minutes. So this
he was
show
ripping around and then he tipped it over and was like, "Oh no, I broke it." You know?
It shows you. It's going to show you teaching him in that 5 minutes, and then it shows him ride the sled around after that in the mountains.
Well, we talk a little bit.
Can you say where it was? What mountains?
Well, it was in the spring and all the snow had melted. So we just picked a local location where there was snow.
Like our area around here.
Kimberly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sweet. I didn't know that came here and filmed. That's pretty awesome. Yeah,
and we talk a little bit about safety gear. He asked me quite a bit about my Métis history and my ancestors who were Rocky Mountain Métis guides, which is kind of neat. And you were talking before about dogs, and they guided in 1863 by horseback by the Jasper area through the Yellowhead Pass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That'd be quite the trip, hey?
Totally. From Alberta, from Fort Pitt, Alberta to Victoria, BC. That's
a long go. How long would that take? Like a month?
I don't know the time.
Right?
So they left.
That's a long ways.
So a lot of their river crossings actually, like in the Jasper Villemont area, were gnarly, and there's some sketches. They were guiding tourists from Europe, and then those tourists went back to Europe and became celebrities for their exploring trek.
Yeah.
And then they got a lot of the incidents kind of depicted in sketches, because there weren't a lot of photographs back then, right? So some of these river crossings are like losing the horses and super high water and stuff. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it would be. I can only imagine though.
Yeah.
Would have been gnarly. So touching a bit more on your business and the clients that you get, and I want to make sure that everyone understands what's available to them when they want to do a course with you, and that would be rentals are available to them. And so you're renting sleds from Ghost Rider Motorsports, or your clients are renting sleds from Ghost Rider Motorsports, Avalanche gear. They're able to get everything.
Yeah, and we haven't had this service around here until recently, so it was great last year when we started our relationship between Canada Backcountry and Ghost Rider Motorsports, because they have quite a extensive rental fleet.
Yes.
So sometimes some of my natural resources clients, they have a big day where they have a bunch of people they need to get out on sleds, and we have Ghost Rider has that available for them.
Yeah.
And then, exactly. If people don't have updated Avalanche safety equipment, they can rent that as well.
So that's airbags, beacons, and then even sometimes probes and shovels, hey?
Yeah. Well, to go into the backcountry snowmobiling, it's good, best practice to have your 3 essential pieces of equipment. You have your probe, your shovel, and your transceiver. And then the supplementary, the additional one that people who expose themselves often, like the pros and practitioners and high recreation, like elite recreationalists, will always have the Avalanche bag, just because of our exposure level, right? It just reduces the probability of being buried that much more.
What are the different courses that you offer for clients, people to go to have with you?
I do the Avalanche Canada AST1 curriculum, the Avalanche Skills Training Level 1, which is considered essentially our learner driver's license for going in the backcountry. And what that does, a lot of people have took it like 5-10 years ago, and they're like, I'm good. But now, with the resources available on Avalanche Canada, there's so much information. You could just educate yourself forever and be so much more informed and so much more aware of where the problem is in the snowpack to avoid it. And that much better at coming home safe and not having incidents, not getting injured, not losing friends. And now that it's so extensive, I think a lot of folks that took the AST one a while ago will really still find value in doing it again to seeing all the resources. And I do a couple different options with that course. You could just do the 8-hour slog of classroom with the day. A lot of people just want to get it done in a weekend.
Yeah.
Because it fits better with work and it's just like, okay, we got it done. But I prefer doing it virtually now that we have so many virtual options available and people are getting more used to that way of taking training. And then we'll do, we could do 2-hour sessions. We could do it every week ahead of time so we could start getting the theory done.
Yeah.
And then people maybe want to go out in their yard, look at the snow, maybe they're going out sledding, and then it doesn't take your whole weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just the one field day where we piece it all together in the field and pull the practical together.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that you were doing that. I
Yeah.
always thought it was a 2-day thing. So this is awesome you're offering that.
Yeah, it's tricky because some people, you got to get the right group together who likes that virtual option. And then
Yeah.
when we do it on the computer, everything's there. And I've found that the content's that much easier to absorb. Like the uptake is like incredible. And then we end up for the 4th day going over trip planning, going over mapping, like stuff that isn't typically part of the Avalanche Skills Training Level 1.
Yeah, yeah.
And, well, it's part of it, but not that extensive. So then people are able to really plan their trips better.
And then you're also, you'd said something to me last year, I think maybe even 2 years ago, you were starting to create a guide course. And has that been put into place? Do you have that together? Is that something you're offering?
Or are you talking about when I was like, hey, let's go and do an overnighter with some tents and we'll do some avalanche training and some navs and some...
That one, but also there was one for guides, because I thought that guides were having to take a course soon. Is that
Yeah.
the same one that you're saying, the overnight one, or is it 2 different ones here?
Yeah, the overnight one was just kind of putting together, like, every operation does guides training, right? Where you
Yeah.
go and you do a bunch of different competencies to get them fresh for the season.
Yeah.
And then I think what you're referring to is the Canadian Motorized Backcountry Guides Association,
Yeah.
which is the CMBGA. And what that is now a guiding standard for snowmobile guides, modeled quite closely with the ACMG, Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, and it follows the Canadian Avalanche Association standardization with training, certification, experience, and continued professional development.
Yeah.
That's a big piece of it, of continually going out, and so that's what I wanted to do, was put together some continued professional development for some locals.
Yeah.
To work on our ropes, to work on our avalanche transceivers, to work on our first aid rescue, and all the different competencies that you need.
Is that still coming together? Something you're going to put together, or what's your plan with that one?
I think last year it was a snow issue. Like
Yeah.
we didn't have snow, right? So it was
Yeah.
like, well, and then it keeps getting bumped into the season. So that's something you want to do early season, so people are all primed, and then so the practitioners aren't like drawn away for contracts and stuff, right?
So this is something still in the works then?
Well, that's
basically.
something that we could get a group of people together and do.
Yeah.
And I think that like kind of setting up a camp somewhere is a really cool part of it, because then you're just kind of like out in the elements.
Yeah.
And then the Canadian Motorized Backcountry Guides Association, every year, last year was our first full examination process. So I'm on the board, and I was also a part of the instructor team for that. So I got to contribute to the examination process after I passed and got my certification the season before. And that is already, we're doing courses every year for level two course.
Yeah.
Last year it was 3 days. Now it's 6 days, because the feedback was that people wanted it to be longer. So now it's a little bit more expensive, because you have twice the cost.
Yeah.
And then, so there's a level 2 course. This is what happened last year, the level 2 course. And then we go to a lodge and do an examination for all the level 2 candidates who took all this training. And the idea is we look for the gaps in knowledge at the training course, And then candidates are meant to go and practice that, to come back to the exam, to be successful at the exam.
That's awesome.
And then we also have level 3, which is the lead guide. And if you pop over to cmbga.com, it explains sort of the terrain restrictions for the different levels. A lead guide basically runs an operation under a avalanche safety plan. And then an assistant guide can essentially operate in the same terrain, but they always have to have remote access to a lead guide for decision making.
Yeah.
And the terrain that they operate in, there's decisions made ahead of time by the group before, with the guidance of the level 3 lead guide. So if you have higher avalanche conditions, then you'll have maybe terrain restrictions within your operating area. And then the trail guide is meant for kind of like those mom pa trips or those beginner guides who are just kind of getting into the industry.
Yep.
So less certification required, but still kind of familiarizing themselves with guiding competencies, starting to get the experience to move through higher into the Canadian Avalanche Association certification, and then to learn where their gaps are so that they can continue practicing that to move into higher competence or higher levels as well. And my Indigenous apprenticeship project is meant to start dipping people's toes in what requirements and competencies and skills are necessary to go start taking the operational level 1, start taking the CMBGA assistant guide.
I see. Where does someone go if they wanted to sign up for a course now? Do you have a calendar schedule already set up for this winter? Like, how booked up are you? Or where do people go if they wanted to sign up for something?
They can go to canadabackcountry.ca.
Yeah.
I just had to relaunch my website. It got hacked.
Oh no.
So I've been ramping it up. I'm super happy with how it looks now. I just launched it a couple days ago. A lot of work to get that back going. And yeah, so there are a couple courses. I'm just kind of filling my events calendar now. I just was populating everything to get it live.
So I see there's a cram course in March.
Yeah.
Is that one full? Do you have room?
In March, it's in January.
Is it in January? What's the
Does
one?
it say March?
March. Yeah, there's one for March. I think like 18th or something like that.
Okay.
I may be wrong though, but I just thought that there was a Cranbrook course in March.
I definitely have
maybe
a
I have to have a
Cranbrook
look.
course January 25th weekend.
Okay. Is that one full or do you have room?
I have room.
Okay, so make sure everyone knows that's going to watch this podcast. That
Yeah,
there
and
is.
like probably tonight I'll get populating all those dates in there.
Yeah.
And then if you don't see a date that you like, or you're a shift worker and you want to do things midweek, I can totally accommodate that. I was just sort of hitting some open weekends for now because a lot of recreational riders like to do their training on the weekends.
Yeah.
But I'm flexible, and definitely midweek works for me as well. I just have a bunch of background admin stuff to do with the land use permitting. I just have to get it out ahead of time.
Okay.
So reach out, contact me.
Perfect.
All my information's on canadabackcountry.ca.
Email address, stuff
Email
like that.
address,
Okay.
alex@canadabackcountry.ca.
Perfect. So what got you into all this? Were you a slider your whole life, or did you start sledding kind of, teens, or when did you get into it all?
Yeah, well, I was a snowboarder originally. I grew up in Invermere.
It's crazy how many people say that. Everyone originally, and I'm going to assume that you used the sled to access the backcountry to go skiing or snowboarding.
Yeah, and
It's-
I mean, I didn't have motorsports in my childhood because it was expensive.
Yeah.
Like I was playing team sports and whatnot, and that was kind of draining the piggy bank.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have the opportunity to. I had a bicycle and whatnot, but and then when I was about 25, I was getting into the backcountry rather than the ski path or the ski hill pass. I was getting into the backcountry by snowmobile with my partner at the time. He had a spare snowmobile, so I was on a old trailing arm 97 670.
Yeah.
The thing had been beat up so many times. Everything was like
Bent trailing
riveted
arms.
back together, heavy as crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I always tell people in my snowmobile mountain riding, that's another course I do, snowmobile mountain riding skills, which is original curriculum that
Yeah.
I put together and originally got to test out on the Canadian Armed Forces. So that was awesome because they learn really well. That's a group of people who are just, that's their job, is to learn and train. So you could really determine what worked well and what didn't work well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always tell people if you learn on old iron, it's going to make you a better sledder, you know?
It does. And you have a more understanding of how everything developed through all the years too, and have a greater appreciation for these.
Totally. And you know how to heave your body weight around and use leverage points, and because those machines needed it, right? They needed that big weight transfer. They needed
The big riser.
Yeah.
To get all that leverage and pull that sled over. And we're talking mountain bars too. You needed the mountain bar back then to have that extra leverage point.
Yeah. And you can see them just like the tunnel's just bending as they're like getting it on edge on hardpack.
The running boards are folding because there's too much weight on the one side.
Exactly. And then I went into the XP chassis. I was Skidoo forever, and like my friends down in Idaho, they would always joke and laugh at me. Oh, that crazy Canadian girl ripping around on this hardpack variable snow conditions with an XP. Like, what's she thinking? And I put I think I put 6,500K on that thing, and then I went into the E-Tech. No, that was my XP, was E-Tech, was my first E-Tech, my 11.
Is that when you really got into sledding and left the skis and snowboard at home? When you bought that sled, or were you still packing your skis and your board?
No. Yeah, as soon as I got into that newer, modern rider forward geometry, it was sledding only.
You left your snowboard boots at home and started putting on some good snowmobile boots.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually a big change in my riding when I went into the snowmobile boots. Yeah. Because you have that ankle hinge, right? I was just destroying my hips and my knees because I lost my third hinge. And then when I got into the, because I played college basketball, so my joints are rickety from all that. But, and then when I got into the snowmobile boots, it was just like, what?
Yeah,
I feel like
flex.
a ninja. This is awesome. Yeah.
Did you ride with a lot of other girls as you were learning, developing your skills? Or did you have to keep up to the guys all the time and you learned from going riding with the men all the time?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's tricky because we know that we don't always communicate the best with our significant others in high pressure environments. So we see that phenomena of all the female specific riding clinics, right? Because it's easier to learn from someone who knows, like, can see your perspective on things. And also just even like an extra 3 inches in height. You have different leverage points, longer arms, you know, that extra 20 to 100 pounds is handy, right? And the different muscle density as well.
Julie went to one of the girls' sled camps. Mm-hmm. The biggest development for her that year, she gained so much. And it was a lot of, learning. You're shorter, your leverage points are different and all that. But it was also learning the confidence and to see where other girls are and what they're doing. And she come back and I think her riding went from the beginner immediately into the intermediate just from that course. And it did wonders for her. And then I didn't understand it all because I'm the guy. I'm like, well, just pin it. Like, it'll go if you just go. And I tried to, tell her, don't hesitate. But the girls' sled camp had a different way of teaching her. And all the girls could talk to each other and kind of figure it out together and things like that. Speak of the devil, here she is. Yeah.
Came to oogle at her snowmobile.
Yeah. We're just talking about the girls' sled camp that you were in and how much it helped you for all that kind of stuff. Another thing that Julie found and learned from that camp was even a brake lever, because her hand is that much smaller, and the amount of gas and brake that you're using to reposition your sled on an angle or a side hill, that she needed to have more fingers around the handlebars and not have to reach so far to loosen her grip to grab that brake lever. So even getting a different brake lever helped her a ton.
Yeah, a lot of sleds are going to the narrower handlebars now. And I found when that happened, I didn't need that smaller brake lever anymore. For whatever reason, it gave me that extra, I don't know, distance or, Yeah, but before that, I was always changing like I was either struggling with like some cramp, like my hand, my brake hand would always struggle.
Yeah.
Like that's where my injury would be. Or I'd change the brake lever.
Yeah. I never thought of that. The handlebars are getting skinnier though. You're right.
Yeah, like as soon as
Even-
they went into like skinnier handlebars, it just gave me that extra quarter inch closer to the brake lever, I
I
guess.
just put bars on my Viper, and they got those little notches on the end to where you can cut them to set them. I didn't even cut them. I just left them full width. I might
Yeah,
be pulling them off
actually-
to look. I'll measure these ones now and go measure that one, and I'll probably cut them down to make them the same.
Yeah, and I had heard of some gals kind of cutting a segment out of the center of their handlebars.
Oh, and sleeving it inside and then putting it together again?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Never thought of that.
Just for the narrower shoulders and wingspan.
Yeah. So, as a rider, then, when was it that you decided you want to start a career in the Avalanche training? Like, you
Yeah.
bought this Skidoo, you were a skier. Did you think you wanted to pursue that back when you were snowboarding still? Or did you pursue this once you had gotten into sledding more?
Well, my riding abilities started like rapidly improving. I was super fit when I started sledding and really competitive with myself. I wanted to continually get better. And then I got to the point where my riding was taking me into areas that I knew I didn't have the training or knowledge to manage the avalanche hazard out there. So then I started taking higher professional level avalanche training. And then I was actually a outside sales rep and had this like baller career that got me all the toys and property bought and everything. And then I actually went to school for life coaching and started really exploring my core values and just determining that, selling electronics wasn't really aligned with my core values. And I left this career. Everybody thought I was crazy. Still, some of my clients here in Cranbrook are just like, what were you thinking? And then I just kind of took some time off and joined the Canadian Armed Forces as a Canadian Ranger, which is a division of the military that specializes in backcountry access and survival. And then because I had this professional level training, avalanche training, that kind of fast tracked me into coming on more light over snow vehicle training courses. And then, like I said, that's when I kind of got fast tracked into a snowmobile mountain riding skills instruction where I got to create my own curriculum. And then, it was just kind of, and because I had that level training, I could be an Avalanche Canada AST1 instructor. So I became a training partner. And then, that's
How long ago was that? When did you get into this?
2017.
Okay, so you've been at it for like 8, what's my math here? 10 years, or no, 6 years. Yeah.
8 years.
8
8
years.
years with Canada Backcountry, and then I was instructing before that, about 10 years.
Okay.
And then like backcountry experience, 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to stop quietly. There's other people in the room. What do you want to know?
I said we met in 2017. You should know that date.
It's only on the wall when I wake up and look.
Getting heckled.
Yeah. So obviously this podcast is a little bit about shoots. We do this, we talk about it quite a bit. And you really wanted to talk about it when I brought it up initially, and then I was scared, didn't want to bring it up. So let's talk about it. Obviously it's a totally different snowpack in the chutes compared to the stuff that you're training on the moderate slopes, trees, things like that. What is the difference of the snowpack between a chute and a regular hillside that is part of your training course?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I'm not a chute climber, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. I'm definitely someone who can pull a line to get into a zone,
Yeah.
but, climbing chutes don't turn my crank, I like trees, dense, creeks, deep, that kind of fun riding and stuff, right? So I reached out to one of my mentors and I was like, hey, I'm going to be talking with a chute climber and I'm curious what And he basically said the same disclaimer, like, I do not mitigate, like do avalanche assessments for chutes, but we had some really neat dialogue about it. And the main thing about that type of terrain is it's too steep for snow to deposit on. So
Yeah.
it's constantly sloughing off that
is.
slope. So avalanche practitioners, we're typically looking at a snowpack that hasn't been disturbed, right? And we're looking at the different layers and how the snow, different precipitation, different weather, temperature, wind has affected that snowpack to create problems in it in different areas. And if you start paying attention to it closely and developing your observation skills, you can avoid avalanche hazard quite well, particularly on snowmobiles, because we have an engine. So if we have a lot of avalanche hazard here, doesn't take us very long to go somewhere else where there isn't, right? We go to a totally different aspect, and maybe the snow's deeper. And that's also a cool thing about having avalanche training, is once you start knowing where the problem is and whatnot, you can also turn those observation skills onto knowing where the greatest snow is and the freshies. And so it's all a big knowledge base that you're continually developing.
Yep.
So back to chutes. The snow is constantly sloughing off of anything 40-degree slope and steeper. And
Like, we almost prefer to see a high avalanche condition when we even go to chute climb, because guaranteed you pull up to the bottom of that hill and it's already cleaned itself out. And probably 90% of the time when we're chute climbing, there's a debris field at the bottom. Always. And you can see it. It only needs even a foot or two of snow on top. You're still going to see that debris field.
Yeah.
And we constantly see that. The snowpack in the chutes is actually considerably less than you have down at the bottom. I guess obviously wind and all that, but the snow is always sliding out of them.
You might want to watch out for that kind of got put on my radar, is that debris field, that distributed snow that has fallen out of the chute. If it falls on top of a persistent weak layer, like an ice layer or a facet layer, like there's a few different layers that we watch out for that persist. So they get buried and then they don't go away.
Yeah.
So if that snow is sloughing down,
It doesn't actually hit the bottom, and it's sloughing to like the midway point of a hill.
Yeah, and it's stopping right around that 37-degree slope as you're entering.
Yeah.
You could have a problem on the slope before you get into the chute.
Yeah.
So terrain selection and kind of choosing areas where that lower section isn't going to run you out into some sort of terrain trap or hazard or something.
That's interesting. Definitely
And
something
also
to
like
consider.
a big area of the same, like a interconnected slope.
Yeah.
Where it might have that. The thing about persistent weak layers is that they often cover the slope completely in that particular area. So if you have a big interconnected slope, then that could be a problem. It could be a lot of snow coming down as that person's entering the chute. So that was kind of like one that is a little out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And then you guys were actually talking about in the podcast with Alex Hansen is that, and with Taylor when he kind of got jammed up in the soft stuff at the top. You know, he was like, oh, I didn't think it was that soft. It got really soft there.
Yeah.
So when it's like soft like that and deeper, it could potentially be wind affected.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Definitely is.
So you could get that wind slab at the top. And it sounded like you guys were already talking about it, where you're like, oh, what's at the top? Where you don't know what you're going into, where you have nowhere to go, sort of thing, right?
The big chute that we climbed, me and my friend Chris actually hiked the whole top end of it. So we dug a pit at the top. Just wanted to know, like, this is the section that we can't see slide. You see the debris field all the way to the bottom. So you know that whole section of, the 3/4 of the chute is constantly moving, sliding, and cleaning itself out. But that top section where it opens back up after the chute and it starts to get to that kind of moderate slope again, it's like, that's the scary. And if that lets go, goodbye, because you're going all the way to the bottom. So we actually dug a massive pit up there and did that. And then we actually even hiked the whole thing to check the snow to make sure it's the same. And then all the way into where it gets skinny, and it's like 5 feet wide. When I say skinny, it is like really skinny in there. And
one thing you can do, and you guys were talking about managing cornices by like cutting them throughout the season, but if you wait till it's like you're about to ride it and you cut it then,
yeah.
and then that's a way to
Trigger.
test the slope, right? Like it's a pretty good slope test to cut a cornice
Yeah.
and dump it right into the top of and see it go down there.
I think it'd be the funnest thing to do. I want to do it. I've
Yeah.
never done it. I've heard of guys that do it. It actually would be just fun to do it just because it doesn't even have to be a slope that you're climbing. It could just be something that you want to let one go.
Yeah, and you can practice it in other places that are kind of less consequence. You know?
Have you ever heard of anyone doing it besides us talk about it here?
Oh yeah, a cornice cut is a way that professionals test slopes.
What are they using to cut it?
So we have these cables that we do extend.
Literally just like a winch cable. Just round,
They're covered in plastic.
Okay.
You know, so we cut through snow and whatnot when we're doing different compressions.
So it's not a metal cable.
Yeah, it's a metal
plastic,
cable inside of plastic.
but plastic coated.
But
flexible. And that's
Flexible.
all it takes is just lifting that up and down?
Well, when you have a cornice, it's a little trickier. So what you do is you attach it to one sled, throw it over, and then you drive the other sled, and it cuts right through the cornice.
Really?
Yeah. You might want to practice it a time or two before you're up on top of a gnarly chute.
Everyone better catch that. We're doing this.
Yeah, it's actually part of the Canadian Motorized Backcountry Guides training.
That's unreal. I can't wait to do it.
Yeah.
So in the chute climbing thing, I have actually been in one where I went up to the base of the mountain. It all broke off on the bottom, and you could see like the whole hillside. It's clean. You can actually see the fracture right at the rocks, and I'm like, hey, we're good. And this was a learning experience for me as I flew into this chute, and then the chute itself is probably 150 feet long and 20 feet wide. And as I hit that, it suddenly was deep. Totally different. It had not moved. And the second my sled settled, I had actually saw it all in front of me then start to move. And I was like, oh crap, here we go. And I just reached back, pulled my cord, and just fell back into the snow to get away from my sled. And it was scary. It was nuts. It was, you couldn't breathe. That was the first thing I noticed. The second I dropped back into that snow, it was instant. Like my bag inflated all around me, but it was like, it's snow. Every time you do it to take your breath, and now you're kind of fighting to keep yourself upright, but you're tumbling. And it was enough snow to get me tumbling. And I was like, holy moly, if this stops and I am under the snow, this is not going to be good. And luckily, like I said, below the chute, it all slid already. And as soon as I exited the chute and the snow just dispersed, I just was standing in a foot of snow and just stood up. It's like, oh, thank God. But that, unfortunately to say, like, it was a learning experience. It took that instance, that scary moment to be like, that was dumb. But it took that dumb moment and I learned from that. And now to assess that hillside and that slope that much better, like you said, the deep snow layer was something totally accurate. Like there was something going on in that chute that was different. So now after that, we take the whole thing into consideration. You can't just be at the bottom and think, boy, it's going to be the same at the top. No, two totally different worlds. You have to have both of them.
And there's also, well, first of all, that, you know how you said luckily it fanned out at the bottom, so the snow didn't pile into like a gully or something. So that's a good way to select your chutes. And a lot of people will expose themselves to higher avalanche hazard in terrain that's shaped like that. And that's a technique like in heli skiing, like that's a pretty common way of being like, okay, how am I going to select my terrain to manage the avalanche hazard?
That is true. It actually makes it a lot safer. And we do, all the chutes that we climb are like that. They're a large, the airport, for example, in Boulder Mountain in Revelstoke. It's this kind of face with rocks above it. So it's 50% slope, snow, and then 50% cliffs. And then you have these finger chutes that kind of go up in between each one. And when guys do roll their sled out, it'll create a snow slough. And then the second that the sled and the snow slough come out, it just kind of opens up and it dissipates, and there's a sled laying on the side of the hill, not even buried. And you see it quite often happen, and that's just the slough that's coming down with the sled as it tumbles out of the chute. I'm trying to think if I've seen another one.
Also, like cornices sort of indicate where there's going to be. Often at the bottom of a cornice, that's where there's deeper snow, right? So if you see, and maybe there's not a cornice on that particular area because it has broken off, but you can see the same aspect on the slope, and they'll kind of point to where you're going to have more snow.
There's another one that we stay away from, and that's the sunny facing chutes. It's always shady chutes that we climb, but we have one chute that's in the sun, and it's called Ermin's Arm, or the Armpit. It's in Boulder Mountain again. It's right next to the Monster, and Muskoka Freerider has it, and Alex Hansen has it in his film, Dane Revelstoke, and same with Blair Murphy. They have it, and quite a few guys climb this chute. But we skipped it last year because, and actually we've skipped it a couple years now, a few years back, is when we got there, the sun is hitting that in the afternoon directly. And the one time we actually saw a fracture right across the top of the chute, getting back into the tree line at the top of it. And you could tell that that's like a grassy, rocky slope, and there's nothing there that the snow bonds to. So we had to be super careful. And that one was another one that we actually had a situation happen a few years ago where it was like, okay, that is the chute that we really got to be careful on. A friend of mine did have his sled come up, and as he came up, he didn't quite make the chute in the soft snow. The sled got stuck, and as it got stuck, it did carry him down. And again, as soon as the chute opened up, he'd pulled his bag and everything. You watch him go down, and it just dispersed. And again, he just stood up, the same thing. So again, that whole dispersing thing is a definitely, call it mitigate the hazard, or anyway, it makes it a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so we got, again, Alex Ibbotson with Canada Backcountry Services. She put her website up. That's the website, .com.ca. .ca. So anyone wants to get into an avalanche course, learn a few things. You said that you do a skills training course. There's a bunch of different courses going there. Check it out. Anyone that wants to come to Cranbrook, do a course with her. She does them else places. But as we spoke about, Ghost Rider Motorsports rents gear to your clients for them to go out with you and do some avalanche training.
You bet. We and then also guiding. Yeah, going to be guiding this year.
When's that? This year you're starting that.
Yeah.
That's something new I didn't know about.
Yeah.
What areas are you going to be guiding in?
Lumberton.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Totally.
So
with the support of the Cranbrook Snowmobile Club.
Yeah. I remember you came to that meeting and we brought it up. So do you have like a scheduled day? Can people just call you and say, hey, I want to guide, or how's that all going to work?
Yeah, it's tricky with the land use permitting and whatnot, and we're kind of, now that we have a standardized regulation and everything, we're sort of pushing to open it up a little bit more in that respect. I may also be able to guide in other areas where the tenure is held by a company that supports Canadian motorized backcountry guides guiding on their tenure. So that's sort of something, if people are thinking about becoming or going through the program of the CMBGA, that's sort of a benefit, and that's in the works right now. So exactly how that will look,
So if someone wants a guided tour of Lumberton, they can go to your website as well. Information will be on there to book you for a day that you're available.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, I did sort of plan for weekends mostly.
Yeah.
The weekends I'm available, but I'm around weekdays as well. So if midweek works, often there's less people on the trails. Often we get powder in midweek. It doesn't always fall on the weekends, so sometimes that's a good way to plan it. And if you need to rent a sled, they're more likely available on the weekdays as well, I would suspect.
They got quite the fleet. I think they'll be available most of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, that was great. We covered lots. Thanks very much for having me.
You bet.
And thanks again. Oh, I also want to give a shout out to 2B, who I'm an ambassador with this year as well. So thanks for
Congratulations with that.
Yeah, they were pretty keen on both the Still Standing TV show and then also this Indigenous apprenticeship project. And then also I'm just a huge advocate for responsible, respectful backcountry motorized use, because that's how we'll continue being able to be in the backcountry. Because the more incidents that occur, or disrespectful land use, and the people who are trying to push us out of the backcountry have some fuel for that, right? But the more we can be upstanding citizens, like snowmobilers are, like who is the most likely to help someone who is lost in the wilderness or needs a problem or needs a hand, needs to be rescued? Snowmobilers, we
They
love
are.
that. That's what, like, you know, it turns our crank to be able to pull someone out of the ditch.
It does. I've done it lots.
Totally.
Yeah, we've even gone out to help two friends that were stuck in the snow last year in the middle of the night and couldn't get themselves out. They just couldn't get down the slope that they were on and wanted to wait till daylight, which is completely fine. And we went up that night, gave them a hand, rode their sleds out in the dark with headlamps, and they were so happy that they didn't have to sleep up there in the snowbank for the night.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Also want to give a big shout out to Forest Power Sports up in Prince George. I was partnered with them for 7 years, and just because I'm spending more time down south here, and really, really grateful to have a local branch motorsports in our little small town and up in Fernie. So it just made sense to build a relationship with Ghost Rider.
Yeah. Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, Mountain Labs, Mountain Sports Distribution, and Highmark by Snowpulse. They gave me another Avalanche pack, so that I'll have professional level, top grade Avalanche gear for this Indigenous apprenticeship project.
Great. Well, let's hope for some snow.
Yeah.
Right?
And if anybody knows an Indigenous person who wants to get into the adventure tourism, natural resources, environmental industries, go to my website, canadabackcountry.ca, the mentorship projects on the upper tab, and there's a application process. And if there's any companies who'd like to support a project like that, there's also a place for someone to sign up as a sponsor.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.